Monday was smothered chicken. Wednesday was fried chicken. Friday was the fish fry. Sunday, after chapel, was the plate that mattered. Every black student at Fisk, Howard, Spelman, and Morehouse knew the rhythm of the cafeteria line. In the basement of Jubilee Hall at Fisk, a stainless steel well of collard greens held a long-handled fork sticking straight up. Miss Purley ran that line, and she knew every dish on this list by smell. Number 18 was the side that grown men wrote home about. Number 11 was peeled by hand by 6 women at a long steel table every morning. Number 3 was the dish half the students hated and the other half defended. These 25 meals were not cafeteria food. They were Sunday supper, 6 days a week, cooked by women feeding black students since before integration. Hit that subscribe button. Here are the 25 forgotten meals. Number 25, Monday smothered chicken over rice. This was the week opener in almost every HBCU dining hall, from Hampton Institute to Prairie View A&M. A bone and thigh and leg quartered together, dredged in seasoned flour, browned in a flat cast iron pan the size of a car hood, then buried in a brown onion gravy and left to simmer on the steam table until the meat fell off the bone. The gravy soaked through to the bottom of the compartment on a plastic tray. Students at North Carolina A and T in Greensboro used to eat this on the same Monday afternoons that the Greensboro Four were planning the Woolworths sit-in. Cheap, filling, and it stretched. One chicken fed 4 students. The woman who ran the Monday line at A and T in 1960 had learned the recipe from her grandmother in Rocky Mount, and she refused to add paprika because her grandmother never had. Number 24, Salisbury steak with brown gravy. If Monday was smothered chicken, Tuesday was almost always a ground beef patty shaped by hand, seared, and served under a thin brown gravy with a scoop of mashed potatoes beside it. The Salisbury steak at Howard University's Blackburn dining line was made from a mixture the cooks called the bowl, ground chuck mixed with crumbled stale cornbread instead of breadcrumbs, because cornbread was what was left over from Sunday. A cook named Miss Lillian at Howard in 1964 patted out 300 of them every Tuesday morning. She had been doing it since 1952. She used to say a Salisbury steak was a meatloaf that did not have time to sit down. Students ate them with hot yeast rolls to sop up the gravy. Tuesday was for keeping upright until Wednesday. Number 23, fried catfish with hush puppies. This was the Wednesday plate at Tuskegee Institute at Grambling and at Jackson State in Mississippi. Whole, farm-raised catfish cut into thick fillets, dredged in yellow cornmeal, seasoned with salt, black pepper, and a little cayenne, dropped into peanut oil, hot enough to curl the edges in under a minute. Hush puppies went in after, round spoonfuls of sweet onion cornmeal batter that floated to the top and browned dark gold. The tartar sauce was mayonnaise, sweet pickle relish, and a squeeze of lemon, kept in a glass jar at the end of the line. A Tuskegee student in 1965 used to tell the story about eating catfish on the same Wednesday evening that voting rights marchers were walking out of Selma, 50 miles south. You ate, you studied, you marched. That was the order of things. Number 22, salmon croquettes with grits. Breakfast at an HBCU in the 1960s was not a grab-and-go muffin. It was a sit-down meal, and on Tuesday and Thursday mornings at Fisk and Spelman and Hampton, the plate came with 2 salmon croquettes beside a bowl of stone ground grits and a pat of butter melting into the center. The croquettes were made from canned pink salmon, drained, mixed with crumbled saltine crackers, chopped onion, a beaten egg, and a little black pepper, pan-fried in bacon grease until the outside was crisp. Miss Purley at Jubilee Hall served them with a wedge of lemon and a pinch of parsley on top, the way she had learned at her aunt's boarding house in Franklin, Tennessee in 1938. Students did not realize at the time they were eating a Depression-era recipe perfected decades before any of them were born. It was just breakfast. Number 21, chicken and dumplings. The dumplings at Spelman's dining hall were flat, slippery dumplings, rolled out thin on a floured wooden board and cut into 2-inch squares with a paring knife. The cook who ran Spelman's Thursday line in 1966 rolled out her dumplings at 4 a.m. before the kitchen staff arrived because she did not trust anybody else to get the thickness right. A whole hen went into a 20-gallon stock pot with celery, onion, and a bay leaf the night before. The dumplings went in last, slipped in one at a time, cooked for 8 minutes, ladled out over pulled chicken. Young women in white Sunday dresses ate it at long tables with their napkins in their laps because Spelman enforced a dress code in the dining room until 1968. It was not a rule anybody complained about. It was how you learned you belonged. Number 20, pork chops with milk gravy. The pork chops at Prairie View A&M in Texas were thin bone in center cut chops, dredged in flour and fried hard in a cast iron pan until the edges curled up like little hats. The gravy was poured over them right there on the plate, and the gravy was made from the pan drippings with a little flour whisked in and whole milk stirred in slowly until it thickened. You ate it with a scoop of mashed potatoes and a biscuit on the side, and you used the biscuit to wipe the plate clean. A Prairie View student in 1967 named Robert, who later became a civil rights attorney in Houston, used to say that the pork chop plate was the reason he stayed for his masters. He was probably joking. He was probably not. Number 19, baked ham with pineapple ring. Sunday dinner after chapel was the one plate that every HBCU did differently, and every HBCU did the same. At Morehouse College in Atlanta, at Chivers Lane Dining, the Sunday plate in 1962 was a thick slice of bone-in baked ham, glazed with brown sugar and clove, topped with a canned pineapple ring held in place with a maraschino cherry and a toothpick. The ham came out of the oven at 11:30, just as the chapel bell was ringing. Young men walked back from chapel in suits and ties, trays in hand, and the dining hall smelled the way a grandmother's kitchen used to smell on Easter morning. You ate the ham with cornbread dressing, candied yams, and collard greens, and you stayed at the table for an hour. Sunday dinner was not a meal you rushed. It was the plate that told you home was still there, even when home was 200 miles away. Number 18, cornbread dressing. This was the side that grown men wrote home about. The cornbread dressing at Hampton Institute in Virginia in 1965 was made from 2 different cornbreads, one baked the day before and crumbled rough, the other baked that morning and crumbled fine. Sage, onion, celery, a little poultry seasoning, chicken broth from the Sunday hens, 3 beaten eggs to bind, and just enough drippings from the roasting pan to make it rich. It went into a deep steel pan covered with foil, baked for 40 minutes, then uncovered for the last 10 until the top crusted brown. A spoon went straight down through the middle and came up with a wedge that held its shape on the plate. The students called it the Sunday plate within the Sunday plate. The cook at Hampton in 1965 was a woman named Miss Etta, and she had learned the recipe from her mother, who had learned it from hers, all the way back to a kitchen on a farm outside Suffolk, Virginia, after emancipation. What most people miss about dressing is that it is not stuffing. Stuffing goes inside a bird. Dressing stands on its own. The Hampton dressing stood on its own, and it fed generations of Black students who would go on to teach, preach, heal, and litigate across the United States. Every Sunday, a student ate that dressing A little more of their grandmother's kitchen came with them into the rest of the week. That is the thing about a good side dish. It does not just fill you up, it tells you who you are. Number 17, candied yams with brown sugar crust. The yams at Bennett College in Greensboro were thick-cut rounds of orange-fleshed sweet potato, parboiled first, then layered into a buttered pan, sprinkled with dark brown sugar, dotted with butter, dusted with cinnamon and nutmeg, and baked until the syrup bubbled up around the edges and formed a thin, crisp crust on the top rounds. The woman who ran Bennett's dessert line in 1963 never measured the sugar. She scooped it with her hand. If you asked her how much, she would tell you as much as the yams want. You ate them beside the ham or the chicken, and they tasted less like a vegetable and more like a dessert that had made it onto the dinner plate by accident. Students at Bennett in those years were mostly young black women who would go on to become teachers, nurses, and social workers. They ate candy yams on Sundays and remembered them on Thursdays in their own classrooms 40 years later. Number 16, collard greens with smoked turkey neck. Every HBCU had collards on Sunday. At Fisk, Miss Purley cooked them down for 4 hours with a smoked turkey neck instead of a ham hock because she said the neck gave up more flavor and less fat. She washed the leaves in cold water 3 times because grit in your greens was a sign of a lazy kitchen. She stripped the stems, rolled the leaves into tight cigars, and cut them into ribbons with a long knife. Into the pot with the neck, a chopped onion, a tablespoon of cider vinegar, a pinch of red pepper flake, and enough water to cover. 4 hours at a slow simmer. The broth at the bottom of the pot was called Potlikker, and the students who knew what they were doing asked for a little cup of it on the side to sip. That Potlikker was the oldest thing on the tray. It came from West Africa, passed down through slavery, through sharecropping, through the Great Migration, and onto a plastic tray in a basement cafeteria in Nashville in 1965. Number 15, black-eyed peas with onion. At Prairie View A&M and at Texas Southern in Houston, black-eyed peas were on the line almost every weekday. Dried peas, soaked overnight in cold water, cooked the next morning with a smoked ham hock, a whole peeled yellow onion studded with 4 cloves, a bay leaf, and black pepper. 2 hours at a slow boil. When they were done, the peas were tender but still held their shape, and the broth was thick enough to coat the back of a spoon. You ate them over white rice, which the students called Hoppin' John when it showed up on New Year's Day. A Texas Southern student in 1968 ate a bowl of those peas on the same January morning that the Orangeburg massacre was happening 4 states away. The peas were about luck. That morning, nobody felt lucky. They ate anyway because eating was how you kept going. Number 14, lima beans with ham hock. Lima beans had a reputation at most HBCUs. Half the students on the line walked past them. The other half asked for a double scoop because the lima beans at Tennessee State in 1964 were not the sad green frozen peas you remembered from public school. They were large dried butter beans, soaked overnight, cooked slow with a smoked ham hock until the skin split open and the starch thickened the broth into something closer to a gravy. Salt, black pepper, a little onion, a little smoked paprika in the cook's private pot. You ate them with cornbread and a piece of fried chicken on the side, and the cornbread went into the broth to soak. The cook at Tennessee State in the mid-1960s was a woman named Miss Juanita. She had come up from Pulaski, Tennessee as a girl, and she had been in that kitchen since 1948. She knew that the black students coming through her line in the 1960s were different from the ones who had come through in the 1950s. They were angrier. They were more organized. They were going to sit-ins and freedom rides on the weekends and coming back to her dining hall on Monday morning hungry enough to eat a horse. She fed them. She fed them the way you feed people you love and cannot protect. She put a little extra smoked paprika in the pot because her own son had marched in Selma, and she wanted the young people at her table to taste something strong. What most people miss about a cafeteria cook is that she was not just a cook. She was part of the movement, feeding the movement one tray at a time. The lima beans at Tennessee State were famous for a reason. They tasted like somebody was paying attention. Number 13, cabbage cooked with bacon. Cabbage was the Wednesday vegetable at Morgan State in Baltimore. A head of green cabbage, cored and cut into wedges, dropped into a pot with 4 strips of thick-cut bacon, chopped rough, a little chicken stock, salt, black pepper, and a dash of vinegar. Cooked, covered for 20 minutes until the cabbage went from bright green to olive and the bacon fat worked into every leaf. A cook named Miss Francis at Morgan in 1966 added a pinch of sugar to the pot because she said cabbage needed something to lift it up. You ate it alongside a pork chop or a piece of salmon croquette, and it was never the star of the plate. It was the backup singer. But a plate without cabbage on Cabbage Day felt like a choir missing the alto. That was the rhythm of the HBCU dining hall. Every day had its own plate, and every plate had its own place. Number 12, baked macaroni and cheese. This was not the blue box. This was a custard. Elbow macaroni, boiled until just short of tender, drained, folded into a mixture of beaten eggs, evaporated milk, whole milk, sharp cheddar, a little mild cheddar, salt, black pepper, and paprika, poured into a deep pan, topped with another layer of cheese, dotted with butter, and baked until the top browned and the custard set underneath. A spatula cut it into squares that held their shape like a piece of cake. At Clark Atlanta in 1967, the macaroni and cheese was the one thing black students from the North and the South agreed on. Chicago students said it was better than their aunts. Mississippi students said it was close, but not quite. The cook, Miss Doris, never said a word. She just kept making it. Number 11, mashed potatoes with pan gravy. The mashed potatoes at Howard in 1963 were not from a box. They were russet potatoes, peeled by hand by a kitchen staff of 6 women who sat at a long steel table with knives and a trash can between them and peeled for 2 hours every morning. Boiled in salted water, drained, mashed with a hand masher, and whipped with butter, whole milk, salt, and white pepper. The pan gravy was made from the drippings of whatever meat was on the line that day, plus a little flour and chicken broth, whisked smooth. You took a scoop of potatoes and a ladle of gravy, and you tried to get the gravy to stay on top instead of sliding off. It never quite stayed. You ate fast. That was the secret. Number 10, sweet potato pie. Here's the thing about HBCU sweet potato pie. It was not pumpkin pie in a different color. It was a different pie entirely. The filling at Howard's Blackburn line was made from roasted sweet potatoes, not boiled, because roasting concentrated the sugars. The flesh was passed through a ricer mixed with brown sugar, melted butter, evaporated milk, a whole egg and 2 yolks, a teaspoon of vanilla, a grate of fresh nutmeg, and a pinch of salt. Poured into a flaky lard crust and baked for 45 minutes. The top set into a soft custard with a thin skin on it, and the edge of the crust was brushed with egg white and sugar so it sparkled. You ate a slice with a cup of coffee on a Sunday afternoon in the lounge, and you talked about what Dr. King had said in chapel that week. Number 9, banana pudding with vanilla wafers. The banana pudding at Spelman in 1966 was built in a deep rectangular pan, layer by layer, like a symphony. First a layer of vanilla wafers along the bottom, then a layer of sliced ripe bananas, then a layer of hot vanilla custard made from scratch with egg yolks, sugar, cornstarch, whole milk, and vanilla extract, cooked until it coated a spoon. Wafers, bananas, custard, wafers, bananas, custard, until the pan was full. On top went a meringue whipped from egg whites and sugar, piled in peaks and browned under the broiler for 3 minutes until the tops were toasted gold. You did not get banana pudding every week. You got it when the kitchen decided you deserved it. That was the point, something you waited for. Number 8, peach cobbler with biscuit crust. The peach cobbler at Fisk in the summer of 1965 was made from Tennessee peaches that a local farmer delivered to the kitchen door in a bushel basket every Tuesday. The cook peeled them, sliced them, tossed them with brown sugar, a squeeze of lemon, a pinch of cinnamon, and a pat of butter, and poured them into a deep steel pan. On top went a biscuit dough, rolled out and cut into rough squares, laid overlapping across the fruit like shingles on a roof. Baked for 35 minutes until the biscuit top was gold and the peach syrup bubbled up between the seams. You ate it hot with a scoop of vanilla ice cream melting off the side in a brown melamine bowl at one of those long formica tables in the basement of Jubilee Hall. Miss Pearlie would walk past the tables on cobbler days with her hands on her hips, watching the students eat. She did not smile often. She smiled on cobbler days. The summer of 1965 was the summer the Voting Rights Act was signed, and it was also the summer that half the senior class at Fisk was still coming back from marches in Alabama with bruises on their arms. They sat in the dining hall with those bruises and ate peach cobbler, and the cobbler tasted like what home was supposed to taste like. The thing about an HBCU cafeteria is that it was never just about the food. It was about the hands that cooked it. Miss Pearlie's hands had been making peach cobbler for 19 years by then. She would make it for another decade after that. Generations of black doctors, lawyers, teachers, and ministers carried the memory of her cobbler into the rest of their lives. That is the quiet, powerful, beautiful thing about a Sunday dessert in a basement dining hall. It outlives the plates it is served on. Number 7, pound cake cut in thick slabs. Every HBCU kitchen had a pound cake recipe, and every pound cake recipe was somebody's grandmother's. At Tuskegee in 1961, the pound cake was baked in a bunta pan so heavy it took 2 hands to lift off the rack. A pound of butter, a pound of sugar, a pound of eggs, a pound of flour, a teaspoon of vanilla, and a teaspoon of almond extract, because the cook at Tuskegee in those days said almond was the secret nobody talked about. Baked at 325 for an hour and 10 minutes until a broom straw came out clean. You cut it in thick slabs, almost an inch wide, and you ate it plain or with a spoon of homemade peach preserves on top. Pound cake was the cake of every graduation, every birthday, every Sunday after chapel. It was the cake that said somebody loved you enough to stand at the stove with a wooden spoon. Number 6, bread pudding with whiskey sauce. The bread pudding at Howard in 1964 was made on Sunday nights from the week's leftover yeast rolls. The rolls were torn rough, soaked in a custard of whole milk, heavy cream, brown sugar, eggs, cinnamon, nutmeg, vanilla, and a handful of plump raisins, then poured into a buttered pan and baked until the top was dark and the center was soft. On the side came a small pitcher of whiskey sauce, though the whiskey sauce served to underage freshmen was just brown sugar simmered with butter and a drop of vanilla. No actual whiskey in it. The seniors got the real one. You took a square of warm pudding and poured the sauce over it, and you sat in the lounge after Sunday dinner with a cup of black coffee and a textbook open on your lap. Nothing in your week ever tasted quite as settled as that square of bread pudding on a Sunday night. Number 5, hot yeast rolls. The bread at every HBCU dining hall in the 1960s was baked on site in the kitchen by hand. Yeast rolls rose in deep steel pans covered with damp dish towels on top of the warm ovens. A cook at North Carolina Central in Durham in 1963 named Miss Odessa made the rolls at 5 in the morning, 6 days a week for 31 years. Warm milk, butter, sugar, yeast, eggs, salt, and flour. Kneaded for 10 minutes, risen for an hour, shaped into small round balls, risen again in the pan, and baked until the tops were mahogany. They came to the line in a stainless bowl covered with a towel, and the tongs clicked as students lifted one, sometimes two, onto their trays. You broke them open with your fingers, and the steam rose out of the middle. You smeared butter on the cut side, and you ate the roll before the rest of your plate because a hot roll does not wait. Number 4, stone ground grits at breakfast. Grits were on every breakfast line at every HBCU in the 1960s, without exception. At Hampton Institute in Virginia, the grits were stone ground from white corn at a mill in Surry County, delivered once a week in brown paper sacks. The cook soaked them overnight in water and a pinch of salt, then cooked them slow the next morning in a mixture of water and whole milk for an hour, whisking and stirring until they were thick enough to hold a spoon standing up. Butter went in at the end. Black pepper, if you wanted it. Some students added a spoon of red-eye gravy left over from the country ham. Others ate them plain with a little sugar and butter on top, which was the Alabama way, even though the Alabama students at Hampton never admitted it. A bowl of grits in 1965 was more than breakfast. It was a message from a previous century, passed hand to hand, still warm. Time equals 1 second / greater than number 3, chipped beef on toast. This one was controversial. Half the students hated it. The other half were from military families and had grown up on it, and they loved it with a fierce, uncomplicated loyalty. The chipped beef on toast at Hampton Institute in 1962, which the students called by a 3-letter nickname that nobody is printing in polite company, was dried salt-cured beef, rinsed quickly, torn into small pieces, and folded into a thick white sauce made from butter, flour, and whole milk with a shake of black pepper and a pinch of paprika, spooned hot over 2 slices of toasted white bread that had been buttered on both sides. You ate it with a cup of coffee and a glass of orange juice, and if you were from a military family, you said it tasted exactly like home, and if you were not, you said it tasted like wallpaper paste. Miss Purley at Fisk refused to serve it. She said the Fisk students did not need chipped beef when they could have salmon croquettes. She was probably right. Number 2, liver and onions every Thursday. Thursday was liver day, whether you wanted it or not. At most HBCUs, the Thursday lunch line featured thin sliced beef liver, dredged in seasoned flour, pan-fried in bacon grease, and served under a mountain of thin sliced yellow onions that had been cooked down slow and sweet in more bacon grease. You ate it with mashed potatoes and a piece of cornbread. Some students loved it, many students skipped it. The cook at Virginia Union in Richmond in 1964 was a woman named Miss Rosa, and she used to say that liver and onions was the plate that separated the grown from the not yet grown. She said your grandmother ate liver because your grandmother understood that you ate what was in front of you and thanked the person who cooked it. Students who skipped the liver line on Thursday came back on Friday twice as hungry. That was the lesson. Miss Rosa did not spell it out. She just served the liver. Those days are almost gone now. Number 1, Friday fish fry with cornmeal perch. The Friday fish fry was the meal that closed out the academic week at nearly every HBCU in the South. At Jackson State in Mississippi in 1968, the Friday plate was ocean perch, dredged in yellow cornmeal, seasoned with salt, pepper, garlic powder, and a pinch of cayenne, fried hard in peanut oil until the cornmeal crust was almost black on the outside and the flesh inside was still flaky and moist. It came with hot sauce in a squeeze bottle, a wedge of lemon, a square of cornbread, and a scoop of coleslaw. Students picked up their trays and walked out into the Mississippi evening, laughing, arguing about politics, making plans for the weekend. Friday fish fry was the meal that said the week was over. That was the part of HBCU cafeteria food no nutrition report ever captured. It was not about calories. It was not about the cost per plate. It was about a generation of Black students who sat down together 6 days a week in jackets and ties and pressed dresses and ate food cooked by Black women who loved them, whether they knew those women or not. That is why the memory outlived the recipes. That is why grown men in their 70s still dream about Miss Pearlie's peach cobbler. Potted meat sandwiches provided affordable protein when fresh meat remained far beyond the family budget. These small tins of processed meat paste cost only nickels and could feed multiple children when spread thin across bread. The paste was salty and intensely flavored, meaning a little went far in making plain bread taste substantial. Mothers would open a single tin and divide it among several sandwiches, stretching resources while ensuring everyone ate before school or work. Potted meat required no refrigeration before opening, ideal for pantries without ice boxes. The flavor was not gourmet, but hunger made it taste like provision and care. Children learned to appreciate what their families could provide. Factory workers carried these in metal pails, eating them cold at work sites where no heating was possible. Number 24, blackberry cobbler. This was a dessert that arrived at your table still bubbling like a kettle left on the stove. A Pullman cook simmered blackberries with sugar in a shallow pan, then laid strips of pastry dough across the top and slid it into the oven. The berries darkened into a thick, sweet filling while the pastry turned golden and flaky. On the Southern Railway, cooks picked up fresh blackberries at station stops along the Appalachian route during summer months. The fruit cost the railroad nothing. The labor cost them almost nothing either. But the result was a cobbler that passengers remembered for decades. Black cooks carried their grandmother's cobbler recipes in their heads. Not written down, not measured. They adjusted sugar by taste. They knew dough was ready by feel. If you have ever eaten a cobbler that made you close your eyes and go quiet, you have tasted what these men carried on the rails. That silence at the table was their legacy. Number 24, tripe and hominy stew. Most people today wouldn't touch tripe, but for Black seniors who grew up in the rural South, tripe was a gift. A pound of honeycomb tripe cost 29 cents in 1972. A can of hominy cost a dime. You cleaned the tripe, cut it into strips, and simmered it with the hominy, onions, garlic, a bay leaf, and water. 4 hours turned the tripe tender and rich. The hominy swelled into a stew that stuck to your bones and didn't ask for anything else beside it. A retired hog farmer outside Macon, Georgia, ate this every Saturday for 9 years after his wife passed. He made it the way she taught him. He said the smell of it simmering was the closest thing he had to her being in the room. Nobody wrote it in a cookbook. It kept a man fed and whole when the house felt too empty to bear. Cornbread, packed alongside jars of Potlikker, created a lunch both filling and deeply nourishing. Potlikker, the vitamin-rich broth left after cooking greens with smoked meat, was saved in jars and carried to work sites where it could be sipped or used to soften cornbread. The broth contained iron, vitamins, and essence of whatever pork had flavored the greens, making it nutritionally valuable despite costing nothing. Workers crumbled cornbread into jars and ate the mixture with spoons or drank it directly. This lunch represented the no-waste philosophy of Black kitchens where nothing edible was ever discarded. Children sometimes drank Potlikker as medicine, understanding it strengthened bodies and warded off illness. The combination traveled well because cornbread stayed fresh for days and sealed jars kept broth safe. Number 23, Welsh rarebit. You would not expect this on a list of meals made by Black cooks, but that is the point. Pullman cooks were trained to prepare European cuisine, French sauces, British pub fare, continental breakfast. Welsh rarebit was sharp cheddar sauce seasoned with mustard and Worcestershire, spooned over toast and finished under a broiler until the cheese blistered and browned. On the New York Central, this was a late-night supper for first-class passengers. The Black cook had to understand how cheese behaves under heat, had to know a roux the way a baker knows yeast. He was expected to cook at the level of a fine hotel while earning a laborer's wages. The Pullman Company demanded perfection from its Black workers. It did not offer respect in return. Welsh rarebit required skill, timing, and knowledge. The men who prepared your supper had all three. The menu carried no credit, not their name, not their face, not a word of thanks. Number 23, Brunswick stew. This was the meal that fed entire churches on a Sunday afternoon. The original came out of Virginia in the 1820s, and by the time it reached Black communities across the Deep South, it had become something different, something better. A senior would take whatever meat was on sale, usually chicken thighs at 39 cents a pound, and drop them in a pot with canned tomatoes, corn, lima beans, potatoes, and a splash of vinegar. 2 hours of simmering and the chicken fell apart into a thick, smoky broth. One batch made enough for 4 days. A woman named Lucille Harper in Savannah, Georgia, made Brunswick stew every other week for 14 years after her husband died in 1969. She never measured a thing. She said your hands know what a pot needs if you've been cooking long enough. The truth is, it belonged to whoever needed a cheap meal that tasted like someone loved them. Fatback sandwiches turned the cheapest cut of pork into portable protein that sustained Black workers through grueling labor. Thick slices of salted fatback were fried until edges crisped and fat rendered, then placed between bread slices while still warm. The salt and fat content provided essential calories for bodies sweating through fieldwork, factory shifts, or domestic labor. Fatback cost pennies per pound because wealthier families discarded it as waste, not understanding that Black cooks could transform it into sustenance. The rendered fat soaked into bread, creating a rich meal that stayed filling for hours. Families bought fatback in bulk, curing it with salt to last weeks without refrigeration. Children learned that this humble cut represented survival, proof that their parents could feed them even when money disappeared. Number 22, lima beans baked in mustard sauce. On the Illinois Central's Panama Limited, this side dish became a destination all by itself. A Pullman cook simmered dried lima beans until tender, folded them into a sauce of mustard, molasses, and vinegar, then baked everything low until the top crisped and the sauce thickened. The beans turned savory, sweet, and sharp all at once, like a conversation between 3 generations of Southern cooks. The recipe came from the Black church supper table, adapted for a railroad dining car. The cook who brought it aboard watched his mother make it every Sunday after service. He knew the molasses had to balance the mustard, the vinegar had to cut the sweetness. Passengers on that Chicago to New Orleans run ordered it alongside fried catfish and cornbread. They never asked who made it. They did not have to. Your first bite told you everything about where that cook came from. Number 25, tomato and okra pilau. This was a low-country meal that traveled from the rice fields of South Carolina into every kitchen where a Black woman knew how to stretch a dollar. A can of tomatoes, a handful of okra, a cup of rice, a spoonful of bacon grease, salt, and water. 30 minutes later, you had a thick, savory pot that tasted like someone had been cooking all day. The bacon grease gave it a depth that had no right being in a meal that cost so little. In the 1960s, a retired domestic worker in Beaufort, South Carolina, named Viola Simmons, made this 3 nights a week on $6 a week for groceries. The whole pot cost less than 50 cents and fed her for 2 days. She told her pastor it was the only meal that made her kitchen smell the way her mother's house used to smell back when the family was still together. She wasn't trying to be a chef. She was trying to feel less alone. That was enough. Cold sweet potatoes served as complete lunches, requiring no sandwich making, just a roasted potato carried in a pocket or cloth and eaten by hand. Families roasted sweet potatoes the night before in wood stoves or fireplace coals, letting them cool before packing for labor. Natural sugars provided energy, while fiber kept workers feeling full through long afternoons. Sweet potatoes grew abundantly in southern soil and stored well in root cellars, making them free for families with garden plots. Children ate them during school breaks, peeling back skin and biting into flesh that tasted almost like dessert. The convenience was remarkable because no preparation was needed at lunchtime. For generations of Black Americans, cold sweet potatoes represented the genius of ancestors who understood that simple foods provided reliable nourishment. Number 21, broiled Chesapeake crab cakes. The Baltimore and Ohio Railroad served these on white china plates to passengers traveling between Baltimore and Chicago. A cook mixed fresh crab meat with breadcrumbs, egg, and seasoning, formed the cakes by hand, and broiled them until the tops turned golden. The crab came straight from the Chesapeake Bay, loaded at the Baltimore station. The cook handled it gently because his mother taught him that good crab meat does not need much. A little seasoning, a light binder, careful hands. That was it. That was the whole method. Black watermen on the Chesapeake had been catching and picking crabs for generations before any railroad put the dish on your plate. The cook in that galley kitchen continued a tradition older than the Pullman Company. He made those crab cakes the way his people had always made them. The railroad just gave him a different kitchen to work in, a smaller one on wheels at 60 miles an hour. Number 22, butter bean succotash pot. Butter beans were the quiet backbone of Black Southern cooking. They were cheap. They kept for months dried, and they turned creamy when you cooked them low and slow. A senior would soak a cup of dry butter beans overnight, then simmer them the next day with corn cut off the cob, a piece of salt pork, onions, and a little water. 2 hours later, the beans had broken down into a thick, starchy stew that did not need a single other dish beside it. In the 1950s, a bag of dry butter beans cost 15 cents and fed a person for a week. The salt pork was often left over from another meal already paid for. A retired seamstress in Natchez, Mississippi, ate butter bean succotash 4 nights a week for 7 years. She grew the beans herself in a garden behind her house until her knees gave out in 1978. After that, she bought them dried from the corner store and never complained about the difference. The meal didn't change. Her body did. The pot didn't care. Crackling bread served as a complete lunch in itself, combining cornmeal with crispy pork cracklings baked into a dense, satisfying loaf. When families rendered lard from pork fat, the crispy bits left behind were stirred directly into cornbread batter before baking. The result was bread studded with salty, crunchy pork pieces that provided both protein and fat alongside cornmeal's carbohydrates. Workers carried wedges wrapped in cloth, eating them cold at midday when no other food was available. The bread kept well for days, remaining edible, long after fresh bread spoiled. Every crackling represented waste transformed into nutrition, pig fat that wealthier families discarded, becoming essential calories. The flavor was rustic and satisfying, each bite offering different textures as teeth found crackling pieces within cornmeal. So here's the question. If you went to an HBCU, or if your mother or father did, what was the meal? What was the plate you stood in line for in a jacket or a dress that you have not been able to find anywhere else since? Who was the cook? Was there a Miss Pearly in the basement of your dining hall? Write her name in the comments. Tell us her school. Tell us the meal one by one. Those women fed generations of Black America, tray after tray, and most of them never got a plaque on a wall. So this is the plaque.